Good afternoon and welcome to the Think Realty webinar. A little bit of housekeeping just to start out with. We're going to feel free to ask questions throughout the podcast and type those in chat, and we'll be getting those over to our guests. The recording will also be uploaded into YouTube afterwards, and we'll share that with everyone so you can listen in and learn. Just want to remind you also, we have our Baltimore conference coming up on March 21st and 22nd. With that, I'd like to introduce Clint Coons from Anderson Advisors. He's going to talk about asset protection planning for real estate investors. And if you really like what he talks about, he will be one of our main sponsors in Baltimore. So you can grab your ticket at thinkrealty.com and come and see and enjoy his presentation. With that, I'll just turn it over to Clint.
Hey, Ray, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone, for being on this webinar today. We're going to talk about how to protect your assets, keep you from losing everything in the event of a lawsuit, and also we'll touch on tax planning as well, because that is another important aspect of real estate investing. And the other thing to keep in mind that all this should have a business planning component behind it as well, because what we want to do is make sure that whatever we're building going forwards, it's done with this in mind. We've protected our assets, we've reduced our taxes, but more importantly, we are building a business that whatever we're doing on the tax side or the asset protection side, it is not impacting our ability to borrow money to grow our real estate investing. And so that's creates a lot of confusion out there when it comes to planning for real estate investments. People get into situations with entities and they find out that they've created a structure that really doesn't work that well for them, that the people that they're trying to use to grow their business are having problems with it. So at Anderson, that is our focus. My background, if you've never listened to me before or read up or seen my YouTube channel, is that I am an attorney. I started a firm in '99 with my partner, Toby Mathis, and it was with this in mind, that we would help investors protect their assets. And when we started it out, it started relatively small, but over the years, we have now grown the firm, and we have we're up to about close to 200 employees now. We work in all 50 states, and our specialization, as I stated, is business planning, tax strategies, and asset protection for real estate investors. And so where I'm going to come into this, and I think that you're wondering, hey, why would I be listening to Clint when I've got my local guy that could probably answer some of these questions as well? You're going to find that when it comes to asset protection planning, tax planning for real estate investors, you really need to be working with someone who understands where you're at and where you're going. I myself am an avid real estate investor. I grew up with a real estate background, meaning that my father's, I think the only reason he wanted to have two sons is he needed indentured servants for 27 years. And the reason it lasted 27 years is because as long as I was in college and he was paying for it, I was that indentured servant. But it taught me a lot about real estate, because I got involved at the ground level with him. That is, buying properties, rehabbing properties, seeing the benefit that comes from having rental income and growing a real estate portfolio. So much so that when I went to college, I thought I was going to become a framer. That when I was in college, I worked as, actually not become a framer, become a contractor. I worked as a framer. And I found I had a passion for that. And to this day, I still do. I have a sizable real estate portfolio that extends across the United States. I have commercial, I have residential. I used to flip real estate for a few years in the Las Vegas market. And so I take this background that I grew up in with investing, with construction, and now I have the legal and the tax side, and I put it all together. And the strategies we teach at Anderson are designed to help you, the investor, grow your portfolio, because many of the challenges that you maybe have already faced or you're going to be facing in the future, well, those challenges either I've faced them myself with growing my portfolio, or we have clients that have faced them. We have about 17,000 clients across 50 different states, and they're actively investing. I can tell you this is a dynamic market. It is not static, and you need to be up on it and understand how these entities fit together, because with entities, they can help you do more deals. It just comes down to that. When you have the tools available that are in place, ready to work for you, you will find that whenever you're in a situation that requires some assistance, those entities can be that assistance, that you've already pre-positioned yourself so you can take action when the opportunity arises. So the first thing I want to talk about, though, is asset protection, because let's face it, you know, when it comes to being sued, if you've ever been involved in a lawsuit before, it's not fun. I've never talked to anyone that said they enjoyed lawsuits. All right, they do suck. And the worst part about it with lawsuits is that you don't even have to do anything wrong and you can still be sued, or the most innocent of mistakes will get you sued. And you can sit back and say, well, you know, I didn't know the law, or that is ridiculous, but it's not going to stop the case from going forwards. And people oftentimes look at lawsuits and they think, all right, well, you know, it sucks that I have to pay all this money to attorneys. Granted, that is a problem. Is it your time? Sure it is. It's going to suck a lot of your time, but more importantly, it's the emotional aspect of being sued, that it will put stress on your marriage. It will threaten your financial future. It will threaten your ability to pay for your children's education, your retirement. All of this will comes up in the event of a lawsuit, not to mention what other people are going to think about you when they find out that you've been sued. And so this type of pressure is what attorneys are well aware of, and they use it to their advantage to pressure many people into settling, to paying them money, when in reality, as I stated earlier, you may have not done anything wrong, but you realize that the cost of defending and going through that emotional turmoil is not worth the time or the investment. So you want to extricate yourself from it right away. Now, unfortunately, too many real estate investors, when it comes to protecting themselves, they take this approach when it comes to investing. It's like, let's just get out there and start our investing. And you don't take a pause and consider what is the implication or the ramifications of engaging in this activity without having the proper foundation in place, because that proper foundation is the foundation that can mean the difference between risking it all versus minimizing your overall risk exposure, because it only takes one lawsuit. And if you're doing this investing in your own name, I've dealt with countless individual investors across this country who've told me the same story over and over again. They didn't appreciate the risk. They entered into the transaction only to then be taken out of the real estate investing game altogether because they made a mistake. And so I don't want to see that happen to you. And if you do not think that this could happen to you, then you're basically electing to ignore the threats. You are putting your head into the sand, so to speak, because it is out there. Now, let's talk about a few of the risks that you're going to face when it comes to real estate investing. And the reason I like to talk about it, I'm upfront about this. When I teach my 3-day tax and asset protection course, I do it with this in mind for the first couple hours. I'm going to scare the living heck out of you. And I tell people this because you need to understand that this is real. You can make a lot of money in real estate. It can produce for you a financial security into the future. But at the same time, you don't want to risk that by not having the proper structures in place to ensure that if anything does go wrong, you are not going to lose everything. So let me just show you some of the few things that we have here. One of the most attractive targets for attorneys right now is environmental, people that allow toxic mold to grow in their premises. Now, unfortunately, toxic mold is one of those things that could be just regular mold, but it takes an attorney to determine whether or not it is toxic. And this particular harm, unfortunately, is not covered by insurance. So those naysayers out there that talk about you do not need all these entities, you don't worry about it, just buy extra insurance and you're covered. Well, they've never dealt with someone that's been involved in an environmental lawsuit before for toxic mold contamination. It's specifically excluded under your policy. And here's what can happen. So we have this client who evicted their tenant, and their tenant turned around after they were evicted and sued them for toxic mold. Now, what's so troubling here is this goes back to what I told you earlier. You don't have to do anything wrong. You can still be sued. So with this particular individual, what had occurred is the tenant had installed their own washing machine and dryer. They bought these two appliances, they put it in themselves without the landlord knowing about it. And when they installed the washing machine, you know, there's a little gasket in the hose to keep it from leaking. It had fallen out. They didn't install it properly, and the washing machine was leaking. Small, fine mist was spraying, and it soaked the sheetrock, and that wall was a common wall with the master bedroom. And when they removed everything, they saw what a problem they had that had occurred there, that they had created. So rather than own up to it, they saw this as a way to use it to their advantage. And they turned around and they sued our client for the toxic mold that had permeated the wall, the common wall with the bedroom. They're asserting that they have all types of respiratory issues. Their children are experiencing respiratory issues. They don't know what the long-term health care costs are going to be. And it just goes on and on and on. And what's so frustrating is that the landlord didn't even know, but they're still responsible. And to make matters worse, in this particular case, we had put that property in an entity to protect against this very type of harm. But unfortunately, this client, they had transferred the property out to do a refi on the advice of their CPA, and they never put it back into the entity. So the client is now being sued individually because they were listed on title as the owner of the property, not the entity we'd created for them. So environmental is big concern. Another one, you have failed agreements. This is pretty straightforward, right? If you're going to buy and sell real estate, you're going to have to enter into contracts at some point in the time, real estate purchase and sale agreements. And there's a common misconception out there that when you enter into a real estate purchase and sale agreement, that your total risk of loss is only your earnest money. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. I recently dealt with an individual who had tied up a property and was attempting to close, but they needed additional financing support from a private money lender. Actually, this was going to be a gap funder, was going to be a partner in the deal. And they had a hard time lining this up. They got a couple extensions on the closing, and finally they just had to pull the plug. And they thought that they mostly had at risk was the $5,000 earnest money they had put forth. Well, the seller wasn't going to accept that because the seller had taken the property off market. And by taking it off market, they had lost the opportunity to sell it at that price. And when they put it back on, they noticed they could no longer garner the price that they entered into the contract with the buyer. So they hired a law firm and they sued. And this buyer that brought me this letter from the attorney and the case and all the supporting documentation was just shocked that you could do that. And I said, yeah, absolutely. This is what can happen. Of course, they wanted to protect their assets at that point in time, but unfortunately, the horses left the barn there and there's nothing we can do for you. You see, their key mistake was what a lot of real estate investors makes, and that is they enter into agreements in their own name. When you're making offers, you should definitely be making those offers in the name of an entity, and then ensuring that if somebody comes after you, then they're going to come after the entity if you don't close, not you individually. In fact, I often tell people, whenever you make an offer, you should make the offer in the name of an entity and put on there and/or designated entity after it. So let's assume it was Big Time Holdings, Inc. and/or designated entity would be the way I would make the offer. So that gives you additional flexibility if you need to assign that contract. So failed agreements. Huge source of liability. A lot of lawsuits come down over these agreements that people end up backing out of or something goes wrong there. Another area of risk, children behaving badly. You see, everyone thinks that your risk comes just from the real estate you own, but in reality, there's two forms of protection here we need to be concerned about. That what happens inside of the entity that has to do with your property, and then we have stuff that happens on the outside. Now, you can be involved in a car accident, you get it, that you can, things that you do in your everyday life can generate liability for you, but also your children. If you have teenage children, they can create liability for you, and that can actually wipe you out. I can think of several instances. I'll just share one with you. In this particular case, the individual had sent their son off to Arizona State University. And while he was attending ASU, he's there, first 3 weeks he was there actually. He was not paying attention. He was just driving a vehicle, and he clipped a kid in an intersection. And unfortunately for them, the person he hit then became a paraplegic. Now, I know that's a gut-wrenching story, and we never wish that would happen to anybody, and anybody that we harm should be taken care of to the best of our ability to make them whole. However, this individual, this couple that I was working with, they were sued into bankruptcy and they lost everything. And the worst part about it, they said, is that they could tell that the attorneys were just in it for the money. And that's what really concerned them. So things like that happen in life. We don't wish that upon anybody, of course, but if it does happen, we want to give you back some control, that you're not going to be placed in a situation where everything you have is at risk. Because I guarantee you it'll create countless sleepless nights for you, and you cannot go back and put things into entities after the fact. We receive calls all of the time from people who begin the conversation, hey, I just got served with a lawsuit, what can you do for me? Unfortunately, the answer is nothing. At that point in time, it is too late. Now, there are many people who go out there and they think, all right, I'm going to create a structure and I'm going to do this the right way. And they use legal doom or something like that to get an entity set up, or someone who doesn't understand asset protection planning for real estate investings. And that ends up, basically putting them in the same situation they were in without the entity. I mean, they have the wrong structure and they think that they're protected when in reality is they're not. And what I find many times is that when we're working with people, there's this perception out there that all they need to do is create an LLC and then they have this type of protection. But the reality is, when you're looking at it, when you need to look at tax planning, you need to look at business planning, and you need to look at asset protection. So all three are working for you, and not one or two of those aspects are working against you because of the structure you created. And then what occurs when they try to sell the property, or they're involved in a lawsuit, or it comes time to paying taxes, the reality is they didn't build this suit of armor. What they did is they put themselves in this situation. I think you can agree by looking at it, no one wants to be that guy. Then obviously you are not protected if you're looking like that. Well, it's easily fixed if you know what the solutions are and what to look for. So we have several different solutions the way we look at things when it comes to protection planning. And the first thing that I like to tell people is that attorneys can't sue what they cannot see. And that's why our first line of defense for real estate investors is going to be a strong privacy shield. Because when it comes to lawsuits, attorneys are always looking for the lowest hanging fruit. That is, who is the easiest to go after because they have all these assets in their own name, or they have a bunch of real estate in one limited liability company. Because I know if I bring that claim against them, that there's going to be a recovery there for me, because if I'm successful, all I have to do is record my judgment. It attaches to all of the assets they hold in their name. And then if I want to proceed forwards to a sheriff's sale, I can do that. Well, you can combat that by putting together a privacy shield that will protect your ownership of assets, protect your ownership of entities, so that people do not know what you have. That is, if they run an asset search against you, they will not see the LLC that you created because it's going to be hidden. They will not see the real estate that you own because it'll no longer be listed in your own name. Now, there's a couple different ways to do this. Let me just show you here on how to create a privacy shield. One of the tools that we like to use when it comes to creating a privacy shield for real estate is a land trust. All right, you can create this trust agreement here, a land trust. This is what it is. It's a green box, and you have your property right here that's in your own name. You could deed this property into this trust. All right, so you deed it into the trust. Now, what's unique about the trust is that when you set it up, when you're transferring title from your name into the name of the trust here is not recorded anywhere. So no one knows who's involved, who the beneficiaries of this trust are. Because in a land trust, you have a trustee. That is the person who holds title. And then you have a beneficiary down here. Okay, the beneficiary. All right, and that is going to be you, because the beneficiary is the owner. But no one knows this because the trust document, like I stated, isn't recorded anywhere. So it's not as simple as, well, I'll just pull up the trust and see who's actually the beneficiary of this trust. Nope, it's impossible. So the way real estate investors protect their assets with privacy through a land trust is that they create this trust, and they set up a trustee that is not them. They use someone else that they trust as their trustee. I myself am probably listed on more real estate in the United States than the McDonald's Corporation. That is, as the trustee of land trusts like this for my clients. They can use a Wyoming LLC as their trustee. The whole point is you don't want your name listed there. So when you deed your property out of your name here into the name of this trust, it would go in as follows. Let's say I was a trustee. It would say Clint Coons, trustee of the Green Box Trust. Okay, so that's actually going to be on title. You see that? You're in the chain of title, but you're not listed as the current owner. So if somebody wanted to sue you personally, and they're thinking, all right, let's see what John owns, and they run your name, they do an asset search in the county in which you live, they perform an asset search in other surrounding counties where they think that you might own property. What they would find is that you used to own this piece of property here, but now it's owned by this guy over here as this trustee. So you're no longer associated with being the owner. When in the reality is, by using this tool, you are the owner. It's just not disclosed to third parties. So privacy for real estate can happen this way. For your business entities, there's another one there. So what we see a lot when people create LLCs here, right? They're setting up LLCs, and then when you look up their name with the Secretary of State, oh, here you are right here. Wow, Karen established a limited liability company. In fact, once I know that information, then I can just take that LLC and see what property that LLC owns. And maybe I find that it owns a couple different pieces of property because Karen did not appreciate the risk from owning real estate, and she put all this property into one entity. Well, when you create limited liability companies, you don't have to set them up this way. You could set them up in a way in which your information is going to be held strictly private, that if somebody looks at that LLC, they will not see you. And the way we do it is we create an anonymity compliant LLC right down here. And this is set up in a state that does not share your information with the Secretary of State, so you wouldn't know it. And then you make the anonymity compliant the owner of this red box here. And so this is a way in which you can get your name off of your company. So you can have, 30, 40 limited liability companies, and none of them point back to you. So privacy is very, very important when it comes to asset protection planning, because if you appear to be that low-hanging fruit, that you have a lot of business entities in your own name, you have a lot of real estate in your own name, I can guarantee you that you've become extremely attractive to that attorney who is trying to decide whether or not it's worth taking the plaintiff's case. That client that walked through his door and they said, hey, I want to sue this individual because I've been wronged by them, or we entered into an agreement and they backed out of it. Well, the attorney's going to run a simple asset search and see if you've got the assets to go after. Because if you don't, he's going to tell his client most likely it's not worth your time. It's not worth your money. Because at the end of the day, even if we win, we still can't collect. And that's the whole game here, right? The attorneys that come after you, they need to collect to get paid. They need their clients to collect to get paid. One of my good friends, he's an attorney where I live, and he was speaking to an individual who had put down some money on his daughter's wedding with this company. And the company went out of business 2 weeks before his daughter's wedding, and he lost $15,000, and he can't have the wedding because the facility shut down, can't get his money back because they filed for bankruptcy. And he went to my buddy and he talked to him about doing something, and my friend told him, he said, listen, you can pay me good money to go after bad, because at the end of the day, the way they're structured with the entities they created and the fact they filed bankruptcy, because we're not going to get paid. And no matter how much you've been wronged and how much money you've lost, it's not worth your time. So this is what can happen. If, in this particular case, my friend looked at the individual, found that he's not worth suing. That's where you can set yourself up with a good privacy shield. Okay, the second line of defense when it comes to asset protection planning is going to be a plan that helps reduce your risk. That is, you're going to use entities that ensure that if anything happens to you with your investing, that you haven't bet the entire farm. For example, what we like to do is create structures that offer two forms of protection. And what I mean by that is you can be down here owning this entity, and you're up here managing the entity, and inside of here, there's real estate. So what I want is a structure that if something happens inside of the box here, it will stay inside of the box. That is, the liability will be contained. Versus if it happens outside of the box here and somebody sues me, let's say that my kid is going out to cut down the weeds on one of my rental properties, and he's cruising down the road and he's got the weed eater in the back with the lawnmower, and he didn't secure the load, and the weed eater goes flying out of the back of the truck and hits the car behind them. Well, there could be some serious damage there. Somebody could possibly be killed in that scenario or maimed. So what have you just risked? Well, if you have the right entities in place and somebody came after you in that example, then with the proper entities, they cannot take the entity from you. I can't tell you how many people I see that have created these types of entities for their real estate investing, and they're involved in a lawsuit and they're just shocked. They'll call me up and they'll say, I don't understand. I did everything I thought I had to do to protect myself. I was involved in this lawsuit, and then I found out that they took my entity and my real estate, everything that it held, in the judgment that was leveled against me. So when you're creating these structures, you want to make sure you're setting them up in a way that will not allow a creditor, personal creditor, to get after the box and take it from you. More importantly, you want to create a structure like this where you're not doing this. You're putting multiple assets into one entity, because as you can imagine, if one of them goes down, then they're all at risk for that one lawsuit, because it's the entity that's going to be sued, not you, the individual, hopefully. But in some instances, they look right through the entity and they actually drag in the individual because it was not set up the right way. They don't have the operating agreements in place. They don't have the right provisions inside of their operating agreements to protect themselves. And so you're probably wondering, what type of entity this is that I should set up. Well, most people set up, limited liability companies for their real estate investing. And LLCs are good, but it's not the entity that should be set up in every single circumstance. I call this the one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to planning. People go out there and the first thing they create is an LLC. And I sit down with them and I ask them, I go, why are you creating that limited liability company? What were you thinking? They said, I don't know. Everybody creates the LLC for their investing. So I figured I needed to have an LLC for my investing. I hear people who train other individuals on investing in real estate. Typically, this is the tagline they give them after they've done their training. They said, and before you get started, you should go create a limited liability company. Well, that doesn't make sense, because the way you should be approaching things is, first, what you need to look at is the activity you're engaging in, the type of investing, right? Investing you're getting involved with. That should be the first level of analysis. What do you want to do? Do you want to flip properties? Are we going to flip? Is it buy and hold that we're getting engaged? We're going to engage in? Is it commercial? Right? It goes on and on. Are you going to wholesale real estate? So the type of investing is very, very important, because that will dictate the entity, but more importantly, how that entity is going to be taxed. I'll give you an example of that. So not too long ago, I was contacted by an individual who was struggling trying to sell a piece of property. What had happened is they went to their CPA and they'd created this LLC for this guy, and he was going to he bought a multifamily unit in the name of this LLC. Now, the thing about limited liability companies, when you set them up, you can choose to have them treated as a partnership, C Corp, tax purposes, S Corp for tax purposes, or disregarded for federal tax purposes. And a disregarded entity means that the entity itself does not have to file a tax return, all right? Everything passes right through to the individual. So you don't have to file a return. You can still have the business entity without the corresponding tax return. And I can imagine that the conversation went something like this. The CPA told them, hey, we'll give you asset protection with the LLC, but it won't cost you a lot to maintain this structure because you won't have to file a tax return on an annual basis. So this investor took that advice, set up the LLC, took title to the property in the name of the LLC, did this, stabilized the property, then turned around and decided they wanted to sell it. Now, that's where they ran into problems. They couldn't sell the property. buyers kept falling out of contract over financing. And it was so frustrating for him. He called me up and he said, I don't get it. Why are these buyers unable to close on the property? Why do the banks keep rejecting it? And I said, it was pretty obvious to me. I said, you know, underwriting's going to see that the property's held in a limited liability company. They're going to want to have a copy of a tax return that goes along with that LLC to verify the income and expenses that you're claiming. Right now, because you set it up as a disregarded entity, it shows up on your Schedule E, page 1 with all your other stuff. It doesn't give them enough information in order to feel comfortable about loaning on the property. I said, your CPA missed this. They didn't know what questions to ask you. What they should have asked you was, what do you intend to do with this commercial property? Do you intend to keep it, or do you intend to sell it? Because having an LLC set up as a disregarded entity is not the best solution for someone who intends to sell a commercial asset, which this is, a multifamily property. You should have been either set up as an S Corp or a partnership, filing a tax return to ensure that when it came time to sell, you could provide the buyer's underwriter the information they're looking for. You couldn't. Therefore, that's why you're in this situation. I said, this is that classic example of the one-size-fits-all approach that everyone assumes that the LLC, many times it's disregarded, is the way to go, when you need to really look outside of that and find other alternatives that are going to match what the investor is trying to accomplish. Wholesaling, that could be another issue that people run into when not using the right type of entity. That is, they attempt to enter into agreements and then want to wholesale them to their buyers list. Well, not all agreements can be assigned. I mean, in Texas they can, but outside of Texas it can be difficult. If the seller states that this contract is non-assignable, then what are you going to do? Well, there's a simple way to solve that. We use what's called a wholesale trust, where you can make the offer in the name of the trust, and then you just sell the trust to the buyer, and then the buyer takes and steps into your shoes. So you no longer have to concern yourself with that lack of assignability that people put into their purchase and sale agreements. So again, yeah, it takes a little thinking outside the box, understanding the motivations of the real estate investor, and then designing a plan that works for them and not against them. And unfortunately, too many of us do not figure this out until we're past that point already, and we're not able to do the deal that we want to do. And that brings me to my next point. When you set it up for asset protection purposes, you also want to make sure that you're choosing the proper tax status for that entity, so that it's going to do for you what you need it to do. One of the concerns that we have for people, if you're going to go out there and you're going to buy and sell property, so if you're a rehabber, and that is being tagged, or if someone who doesn't rehab, you just buy and flip the property. The last thing you want to do is be tagged as a dealer in real estate, because you're doing it in your own name, or you're doing it through a limited liability company that passes down to you. There were a couple individuals out of Chicago a number of years ago, and what they had done with their local attorney, again, not understanding what they were doing, they set up this LLC here, and both of these guys own the LLC 50-50, and they went out and they had it taxed as a partnership. All right, and they went out and they started flipping properties, and they flipped a lot of real estate. Let's say they flipped 75 homes. They sold 50 homes on installment sales. Okay, so what that means, if you're not familiar with it, is that they put a tenant into the property, and then they would sell the property. Let's say your basis in the property was $60K. You're selling the property to the individual investor for $120K, and you're getting $10,000 down. And then you're going to be paid out over time on the rest of that. So they did a lot of deals like this. And then some of the deals, they had maybe 30 properties that they held for more than 1 year that they sold. Okay, and this was as long-term capital gains treatment. So this is how they ran their business. Well, they thought everything was fine until they got audited, and they were shocked to discover that their LLC actually was working against them. It put them in a much higher tax bracket the way it was set up. Had they not chosen partnership taxation, they would have not been raked over the coals by the IRS and had to come out of pocket several $100,000 each. And here's what happened. The IRS came in and they said, hey, You guys are a dealer in real estate because of these flips going on. So not only is the LLC a dealer, both of you are dealers. So what does that mean to you? All these installment sales here that you engaged in. Well, even though you only brought in $10,000 of the 120, all of that gain is recognized in year one. So just think on that for a moment here. You bring in $10,000 in income, or $10,000 from the buyer, but they make you recognize $60,000 in gain. That's the gain between the 60 and the 120. So if you just, you do the math on this, 60, say you're in the 37 or 30% tax bracket, that's $18,000 in taxes. You only have 10K. You're 8K short. Where's that putting you? That's pretty on the fast road to losing all of your assets is where that's going to put you, because the IRS, they are not forgiving when it comes to collecting income. So that hammered them right there. All these deals down here, the 30 deals that they sold right here that they thought was going to be taxed at long-term capital gains at 20%. Well, because they're a dealer, don't get that any longer. Now, instead of being taxed at 27%, you're going to be taxed at 37% because they're in the highest tax bracket by now. So they turned around all that money. Plus, they threw on an additional 15.4% employment taxes because they said it was an active business. You see how this gets out of hand right away? The reason why this became such a tremendous mess for them is because the person they were working with did not understand the type of business they were engaging in, and they chose the wrong entity form. Proper tax planning is essential when it comes to creating your business structure. From the standpoint is you gotta know what it is you're doing. If you don't, then you can end up like these guys did in Illinois. And more importantly, not only is it important from the tax standpoint, setting up the proper entity and choosing the tax election from the business standpoint is equally important. That is, how much information do you want flowing down onto your 1040? I see investors create structures all the time that disclose way too much information on their 1040 for the type of business they're engaging in. So what does that mean? Well, let's say that you're looking to take down some loans and you want to buy this building right here, and you're going to need $800,000 in financing to do it. Well, you've been running the structure over here, your business, and all of this has been showing up on your 1040 right now. And so the lender, when they see your tax return, they're going to see these businesses here. Maybe you even had it set up where one of them's giving you a K1, but it still shows up on your 1040. So the lender then becomes like a camel. That camel's nose is in your tent, and they want to know everything that goes on inside of these businesses that you've created. And so they start drilling down there. And anything they find inside of here could impact your ability to close over here. So when you're structuring yourself, you really have to pay careful attention to how you create your business from a tax standpoint. That is, how much information do you want on your personal tax return? The more information that shows up on that 1040 can hurt you when dealing with underwriters. More importantly, how it shows up on that 1040 is important. Real quick example of this. Well, I see a lot of investors. They have a lot of real estate on their 1040 Schedule E page 1. Great. Well, that means it's all owned in your own name or held through pass-through entities that don't file tax returns. That may make it easier to do your tax return. You may be saving yourself $500, $600 a year by not having to file an additional return, but it's also hurting when you try to borrow. Because if you're dealing with Freddie Fannie products, you're going to get 70, maybe 80% of that income you're generating off your real estate to count towards your debt to income ratio. Whereas if you change it and you have it hitting your return on page 2 of your Schedule E, you can get 100% of that income to count when they're running their calculations. I mean, things like that, liquidity tests, all of this comes back to the types of structures you're creating and working with someone who understands it. And you'll get this eventually. Maybe you're not there yet, but as you build your business, you're going to see that income tax planning is extremely important to your overall growth of your real estate investing. And so you can go through all of this, which is really important. Make sure you get the right structures in place. Make sure that no one knows what you have unless you decide to disclose it to them. And you're operating from a tax efficient point of view, and you're minimizing your taxes, but at the same time, you're making yourself look really good to lenders. But then what are you doing when it comes to planning for the future? And I see a lot of real estate investors miss third crucial step, and that is estate planning. Because I don't know what your motivations are when it comes to your investing. Is it that you want to build a more secure retirement? Do you want to have more cash flow currently? Do you want to create generational wealth for your future generations? Well, all of those may be your motivations. The key is, if something were to happen to you tomorrow, how is your real estate going to be handled? What's going to happen to your business entity? So many people ignore this aspect of building a business. And as a result of it, not paying attention to this, they get to this point where they have all this stuff, all these entities, all this complexity of their life, and then they pass away unexpectedly and they leave chaos in their wake. And their family members, their spouse, their children are left to try to figure out what's happening with all of these assets. So with estate planning, what you need to be doing is creating a plan, a living trust, a structure that will lay out a set of instructions as to what's going to happen after you're no longer here, to make sure that your beneficiaries receive these assets in an efficient manner, that spouses cannot step in and take what you've built up, that if your kids are not yet mature enough to handle the real estate, that they're not going to inherit it yet. I'll give you an example. My son, he is in law school right now, and my wife and I, Tracy and I, we went up, we had dinner with him, and during the course of the dinner, he started asking us if he was the successor trustee of our living trust. And I pushed back on him. I said, now, why do you think you would be the successor trustee of our living trust? He said, well, because, of course, I'm in law school, Dad. That makes sense. And I turned around and said, well, what do you know about real estate? And he kind of stared at me for a moment, and he, threw out a few things that he's learned over the years from working with me. But when it came down to it, I said, Carter, you really do not understand real estate yet. You're not at that point. So, I'm not going to put you in a position to be in control of assets that you do not yet understand. There may come a point in time in the future where you do, and that's going to change. But presently you don't. So there's someone else in charge. I said, besides, why wouldn't we have your sister be in charge? I mean, she already has a rental property that she is managing. Seems to me like she would have more knowledge on how to run a portfolio than you would. And so this is something that you want to look at, that when you're building this up, my motivation and my wife's motivation is to ensure that there's going to be income there for multiple generations, that we don't want someone just to sell off all of the real estate after we're gone. We don't want our children to have to go through a nasty divorce and lose their inheritance, or be involved in a lawsuit because of a business failure and they lose everything we put together. So by putting the proper trust structure in place, you can make sure that this is going to be preserved for future generations, because this is your efforts that you're putting in here now. You're building something that you don't want to risk. And unfortunately, so many people take this aspect and they push it to the end of their planning. And really, it should be something that should be at the forefront of what it is that you're doing. Now, why does this happen? Okay, why do people find themselves in this position? Well, I think a lot of it comes down to this. When you're thinking about real estate, you got to ask yourself, how much do you know about asset protection and tax planning for real estate? And people think they might know a lot, but the reality is probably not as much as you think you should know. And unfortunately, it's because we've got the internet. You can jump on there. I mean, a lot of people watch my YouTube channel, and they get ideas off of there, but that's high level. That is the broad brush strokes when it comes to investing. Everything desires a customized plan, that you need to look at what you're doing in real estate and take these ideas, these structures, and apply them to you to make sure that you're setting up a plan that works for you. Everything begins with a plan, if you think about it. If you're going to create a house, it requires a plan. If you're going to make a movie, what does it require? It requires a plan or a script. Everything's scripted. So when it comes to real estate investing, it should be no different. It's not that one-size-fits-all approach that I showed you earlier, just walking down the dock. And I can imagine many of you listening to this right now, watching this webinar, you've probably already created an LLC. You don't necessarily know why you've created it, how it was created, or what type of LLC you have, but you've got an LLC, and so you feel confident in what you're doing. I get it, but there's more to it. You really need to look at what it is you're doing and understand how these rules work, because it could come back to bite you. Let me give you an example of that. The cost of not knowing. So here we have a situation where this couple had were flipping real estate, and they set up a corporation, a C corporation, to protect their flips from potential creditors and protect themselves from that as well. And they rehabbed this house, and so they bought it for, say, $400,000, put $150, $200 into it, fully rehabbed the property, and then decided that they wanted to treat it as their personal residence. So they deeded the property to themselves, just deeded it right out and moved into it. Well, that was a huge mistake for them, because their corporation was audited, and the auditor asked them, he said, hey, what happened to this piece of property that's roughly valued at $1 million? It's no longer in your corporation. Don't see that it was sold or exchanged. Where did it go? And they said, oh, we decided to keep it as turn it into our personal residence. So we deeded the property out and put it in our own name. Well, the auditor looked at him and says, interesting. Well, I have to inform you that by deeding that property out to yourself, that is a deemed sale. And they said, oh, no, we didn't sell the property. I know you didn't sell it, but for tax purposes, that's a sale. Therefore, you have to pay taxes on the difference between your basis and the gain. So in that case, it's $400,000 of gain they had at the corporate level that they owed taxes on. Now, to make matters worse, after they audited the corporation, they audited the couple individually. And they informed them that the year they pulled the property out, because it was valued at $1 million, that was $1 million in compensation their corporation paid them. And they were deficient on paying taxes on that as well. It cost that couple over $450,000 in taxes because all they did was record one deed. You see what I'm talking about here? When it comes to asset protection, tax planning, business planning for real estate, there are rules out there that you must know of. I don't want to do that. So you got to be aware of this. Otherwise, it could come back to bite you. And I don't want to see you there. So one of the things that we do at Anderson is we're talking about, I speak at the Think Realty events. We like to teach our clients. We can show you through our events, our workshops, how to cut your taxes by as much as $19,000 a year. If you're looking to reduce taxes, we can show you strategies on how to get there. We have a tax department inside of our firm. As I stated, we have over 200 employees based upon legal, financial, and tax planning. And so we work with clients, and on average, our clients will save over $19K a year by restructuring how they're running their business. We can show you through our events how to make yourself bulletproof. So if you're involved in a lawsuit, you've not bet the entire farm, that you've minimized your total risk exposure. I can't make it so that you won't lose anything in the event of a lawsuit, but we can make it so you won't lose everything in the event of a lawsuit. And this all starts with, letting us show you what we do at our events, show you how to develop your own customized tax and asset protection plan with a strategy session. This is what I was referring to earlier, creating your script. I'll give you an example of that. This is an example of a customized plan that we create for our clients, where we show them, through the use of entities, how their situation should be structured based upon what it is they're doing. So they know going forwards, if I'm going to do this type of deal, it needs to be here. If I'm going to do that type of deal, it's going to be there. Now, we do all this, and we educate our clients through what we call our bulletproof real estate structures. And what that means is that we offer you a personal strategy session to design that type of plan. We'll design that out for you. We also provide you 2 tickets to our 3-day tax and asset protection course for real estate investors. It's a $4,500 value. That it's yours to attend this 3-day course where we go really deep into asset protection planning, tax planning, business planning for real estate investors. So we talk about the various entities, land trust, LLCs, corporations, where to file them, how to set them up, to make sure that you're doing it the right way for your particular type of investing. We talk about like Airbnb, for example. That's a hot area, but are you doing it the right way when you're setting up your business for that? Because if you don't have a master lease in place, you could be jumping your taxes up and you won't know it until you get audited. Talk about wholesaling. Show you how to use your retirement funds. All right, so if you want to invest with a self-directed IRA or a solo 401k, well, maybe you don't have one. We'll show you how to get one so that you can go out there and do certain things like partner with your plan. More importantly, we'll show you where people are messing up with self-directed IRAs and they're putting their IRAs at risk. Not only putting them at risk for prohibited transactions, but they're also putting them at risk for taxation, because most people assume that IRAs do not have to pay taxes. That's not true. You have to know the types of investments you're getting involved with and what it will be the tax ramifications. So over 3 days, it's a very intensive workshop that goes through all of these aspects of investing. I'll also provide you 3 live stream events on tax and asset protection planning, a $500 value. These 1-hour sessions are designed to get you ready for our event, for the strategy session, to introduce certain topics to you in a more in-depth manner. And then I also include 1 copy of my book, Asset Protection for Real Estate Investors. You can find it on Amazon if you're interested, but I'll provide that to you. And all of this together, you know, it's $5,700 in services. We only charge $197. It's a $197 investment. If you act now, you'll receive everything that I listed out there. Personal strategy session, where we'll go through, we create a blueprint for you. We'll provide you 2 tickets to our 3-day tax and asset protection workshop, 3 live stream events, and a copy of my book. I mean, where else can you obtain this level of knowledge from a firm that specializes in working only with real estate investors? Now, if you see the value in this and you want to make that investment of $197, if you want to act now, what we have for you is this link right here. If you go to Get Bulletproof Now at the aba.link, BP Think 12, all right? You should be writing that link down right now. Got to go to this aba.link, BP Think 12. If you go to that website, right then and there, you can register for the event. You can get the strategy session, you get the free book, you'll get the information on how to watch the live stream event, and all this information could be yours for that $197 investment. All right, this is tremendous value here. I can just give you a few examples of what some of our clients, attendees have stated. You know, it was amazing, incredible value, the amount of information that was provided. What we do is a phenomenal. The business structure was amazing, but the tax was invaluable from Royce. One of the best workshop was amazing from Samuel. And then Alan wrote down here, every real estate investor that fails to attend this event does so at their own peril. These, I mean, we have thousands upon thousands of reviews from our attendees that have been to this event. I can tell you, we give this information because we want you to make the best decisions when it comes to putting your structures together. And it all comes with a money back guarantee. You know, if you think that our program stinks for any reason or no reason at all, we'll instantly refund you the $197 investment you made. No hassles at all. We'll give it right back to you because we believe so much in what we do. Now, these classes are taught all over the country. So you don't worry, you're not going to have to fly to Hawaii. Well, that's not a bad idea, right, to attend the event, but we teach them all over. We typically have 2 to 3 events going on every month. So if you want to come out to Vegas, we always have an event going on in Vegas, but we're in California, Texas, Florida, Boston. We're all over the country, the Midwest, Colorado. We're there, so you'll be able to definitely find an event that'll work with you, with your schedule. And I'll tell you what, when you come to the first event, you're always allowed to re-attend for free because there's so much information that's provided. It's hard to absorb it the first time. We get that. That's why we invite you to come back to a second event at no charge. So with that, I want to thank you for attending this webinar on asset protection for real estate investors. And now if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you. If you just type them into the box, and we can take it from there, guys. All right, so I got one here. You can go to the events. Let me see what we have here. No. Rodney, are you still on? I'm not seeing any questions from the attendees, at least on my screen. It's not showing if there are questions there. Guys, you can go into the chat box if you have questions and put any information in there. I got a few more minutes. I'd be happy to answer them for you. And if you've done it and I can't see it, I apologize. Let's see what we got here. Yep, I am. I'm not seeing anything. All right, guys, if you don't have any questions, that's great. Make sure you get out to the next Think Realty event in Baltimore. I'll be speaking there. And all right, here we go. Do you provide services for Rhode Island? Yes, we provide services all over the United States. We work in all 50 states in creating structures. And, you know, just because you live in Rhode Island doesn't mean necessarily you're investing there. So if you're investing in Florida, we understand the nuances of setting up structures in these states, the issues that can come up with property transfers in those states. So there's a lot that that we know that's come from the institutional knowledge of working in all 50 states. Got any other ones? Yeah, so offices too. We have offices. We have 3 offices. We have a office in Nevada. We have a couple offices in Nevada. We have an office in Washington State, and we have an office in Wyoming. Although we have those offices in just those 3 states, where right now we're in the process of opening up one in Utah as well. We work in all 50 states. How do you partnership with yourself? I assume that has to do with your IRA or your solo 401k. That takes the setup of the an appropriate entity that would be used. And what's key here is when you're going to do that, you have to fund it in a certain manner to ensure that you do not create a prohibited transaction. And that happens a lot, unfortunately, with investors. They set it up in a way in which they don't realize it, but they commit a PT. But you can do it. It's a one-shot deal. Once you get it funded, you can no longer put money in. We walk you through that at the event. I spend a couple hours just on the retirement planning topic. When is the next time I'm in Atlanta? I think right now we're scheduled for Atlanta for April is when we'll be there. When you sign up for the bulletproof offer, we'll reach out to you and we'll let you know all the dates we have coming up. We've made our schedule out for the first half of the year already, so we're pretty much covered the entire country. Is the course good for small investors? Absolutely. I would say 50 to 60% of the investors that attend the event are small investors. This isn't an event just for people who have multi-million-dollar portfolios. This is also about creating the right structures. I mean, this is a mistake that people make. They think, well, just because I have 3 properties, you know, there's not a lot to lose. When you're involved in a lawsuit, okay, and somebody sues you and they get a judgment against you, it's going to prevent you from investing. It's going to take you out of the game altogether because that judgment gets recorded against you. You no longer become bankable, number one. Number two, if you try to find success, they'll just take those monies from you. So yes, this is extremely important for the small investor. Can you still transfer deeds in the land trust even if you have loans on it? Yes, you can. We talk about the due on sale clause. You can put it into trust and how to go about doing that. Yeah, I know it's an issue for some individuals. So we discussed the differences between limited liability companies, which you could transfer into as well. But what is the likelihood that a lender would find the transfer and then accelerate on the transfer? So a land trust is an ideal vehicle if you're concerned about the due on sale clause to move it in, get it out of your name without alerting the lender something, or if the lender looks into it, get nervous about it. And really that comes down to the type of loan product you have. Freddie Fannie guidelines do not allow property to be held in an LLC. And so that is their concern. But in 20 years of practicing in this area, I can think of 5 instances where notes ever been called due upon the transfer. Another one here, do you need to inform the lender that you've changed the company structure or entity name? Well, it depends. I mean, again, is it a commercial loan or is it a residential or commercial property or residential property? If it's residential, it's not going to matter most likely unless it's a portfolio lender. If it's a commercial loan, then you won't have to necessarily inform the lender unless your loan agreement states that. What I'm really concerned about when it comes to commercial loans is how that shows up on your tax return, because many commercial lenders want to see copies of your 1040s and the tax return that holds the property. That has to be provided typically on an annual basis, after you filed your return. So we got to be careful there that we don't create any problems for them. But it doesn't come up very often when you're making these changes, but if it does, there's typically ways around it. Do you recommend setting up entities in states other than your own domicile? Well, yes, I do, but it also depends on where your investing is taking place. So, the mistake that we see people make routinely is they set up a Nevada or Delaware or Wyoming entity and they try to own real estate directly in Illinois or Florida. And that's just a recipe for disaster, because the first time you need to evict your tenant, you're going to figure out what a colossal mistake you made. So what you should do is you should look at out-of-state entities to use them sparingly to provide certain types of protections. There's some great jurisdictions out there that'll give you anonymity, that will give you charging order protections that should be used, but it's not something that you're going to want to use for all your investments. I spent a lot of time covering that because the benefit of using an out-of-state entity, I have a few of them in my structure. There's not enough words to describe how beneficial it can be if you're involved in a lawsuit. But if you don't do it right, it could be problematic for you. I'm working on buying a mobile home park with 4 trailers. Would you be able to help to create a private asset trust for that? Yeah, we can do that type of work and provide asset protection on the park. We work with mobile home investors and we create structures for them. What you want to do is bifurcate out the trailers from the park itself, so that if something goes wrong, let's say hopefully you don't have it, you got some FEMA trailers or something out of Houston after the flood they were using for temporary, and then next thing you know, it's got toxic mold in it. In that situation, we want to ensure that your main asset, which is the park itself, is not at risk. Question here, I have about 20 houses that I currently rent and would like to set up the correct asset protection plan for my kids. Definitely can help you with that. Going to the event, it's going to be great. We'll do the strategy session with you beforehand, but going to the event I think would really benefit you. This is the way we look at it. We have quite a few clients, and the vast majority of them, we always want them to come to one of our events because we want them to get educated. I want you to understand what it is we're doing for you. We're not like the law firm like my grandfather set up for himself when he was practicing, and that it was playing hide the ball. That is, control the client by not dispensing information to let them know what it is you're doing or how to do it. We're just quite the opposite. We want our clients to be educated so they don't make mistakes and they understand the why behind it. Not only the how, but the why as well. Is it $97 per person? No, it's $197, and that is for 2 people. Okay, well, this course cover all 3 pillars of LLC structures: tax planning, estate planning? Absolutely it does. Everything I've been talking about today is what we're going to be covering, but more expansive, more detailed, and there's so much more information that we're going to go into about limited liability companies. And it's funny you say LLC structures. That LLCs are just a sliver or a portion of what you need to be focused on with your real estate investing. It's a great entity, don't get me wrong. Series LLCs can be beneficial as well if you're in the right state, but it's something that a lot of people put too much emphasis on to minimizing limited partnerships or corporations or land trusts. Those are equally important structures in the right context. What is the master lease and how does that apply to Airbnb property? Well, the master lease is designed to be structured in a way in which you're changing the nature of the income that you're generating off your Airbnb. A lot of people engage in Airbnb in their own name or in one entity, and they don't appreciate the fact that if you own the property, then you've just taken that income and you've turned it into active income. So we wanted to minimize that and take that income and bifurcate a portion of it off into passive income, unearned income, and you do that by structuring it in a certain way. Well, it won't be passive, it'll just be unearned income by using the master lease. And so it can save you 15.4% on a good portion of your income. do your products and services work with the Louisiana? Yes, we do create structures in Louisiana. In fact, we're going to be having an event there this year. So if you want to come to New Orleans, we're going to go there. It might be my first time. My partner's been there many times, but we thought it'd be a great place to put on an event. So we'll be hitting there. For the sake of seeking loan and showing portfolio, I had all the assets under one LLC. Now learning from you, I feel that's a disastrous strategy. Can we help you untangle it? Yes, we can help you untangle it, and we can put it together in a way that will make you actually more bankable as well at the same time. And it's not going to happen, you know, immediately, because if people ask for 2 years of tax returns, but going forwards, it will begin. You'll begin to see the effects of it. And I say this because, you know, I've own a portfolio of over 100 properties, and through my investing and my continued investing, these things come up, and when I'm qualifying for financing, I know what an impact your tax returns can have on you. Is there an ongoing cost besides the $197? Well, no. I mean, that's just it. That's all. That's the investment to attend the event. So there is no ongoing cost besides that. This is to get you educated so you understand what it is you're doing. Another question here. My primary home is in my name. I asked my real estate attorney to put it into my revocable living trust, said he can do it, but warned that if I do it, that title insurance will not cover the trust anymore. Your thoughts? Get a new attorney. Okay. Your title policy will cover the trust when you transfer it in. You just need to make sure that you're using a warranty deed, bargain and sale deed. Sometimes people use, but a warranty deed will get you covered on that. And if you're concerned about it, you can also go to your title company, and they'll do, I forget what it's called, like an endorsement of some sort when you put it into your trust. But a warranty deed will cover you. That's a great point, though, because I had a client that transferred real estate, his attorney, okay, there again, didn't understand what he was doing, transferred property via quitclaim deed into an LLC. And then worst case scenario, he ended up selling the property 4 or 5 years later, and they held back $125,000 at closing because of an encumbrance that was missed. And he went back to his title company and he pulled out his policy and said, hey, you guys are on the hook for this. And they said, no, we're not. You quitclaim deed that property. That deed is what voided the policy. Had you done a warranty deed, there could have been a recovery, but they can't. I have clients in Minnesota, Wisconsin. Can you help with them? Yes, we can help clients. Again, we work in all 50 states. When is our next live event? Well, it won't be until January. The next one, I believe, is in San Diego or San Francisco. I can't recall which, or Las Vegas, but we've got 3 events in January, February, March. You can see some of the events on our website. If you go to andersonadvisors.com, but we only list a few out. But if you call in, once you get registered, we'll go through all the events for you and get you into one of those upcoming events. So let's see what else we got here. Okay, great. Looks like we're at the end of the questions. I just want to say, everyone that was on here, thank you very much for coming on. I hope you learned something about asset protection, tax planning for real estate investing. This is a key subject matter. Oh, there's a question here about what is the link again. Let me just pull that up one more time. So the link is right here, aba.link, BP Think 12. Go there and get registered for the event. I look forward to seeing you at one of our live 3-day tax and asset protection workshops. And if I don't see you there, I'll definitely see if you're going to make it out to Baltimore. Come by, say hi, stop by the booth, say you heard me on this webinar. And I look forward to meeting you there. All right, everyone, be safe and have a Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and hope to see you next year. Take care. Bye-bye.